Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today we're going to be taking a look at something kind of curious, perhaps even a little unexpected. We're going to be taking a look at the first 8 releases from PolyMega, their new CD collection of physical games that they are publishing. I was sent all 8 of these for review, and it covers a wide range of games and genres, and each of these sells between $35 and $40 US. And if you're like me, you probably asked, why are they doing this? This seemed kind of unexpected, and I'm going to get into why here. We're going to open up each one of these because it definitely has, well, it feels like they're kind of going after that Evercade model, and we're going to jump into each one of these. But I guess I should probably start off with, who is PolyMega? What do they create? I mean, I think there's going to be some people out there who have no idea who this company is. So the PolyMega is a pretty interesting device. It's an emulation computer that runs Linux, and if you get these different modules for it, it supports a ton of physical retro games. To give you an idea, it supports the original PlayStation, the TurboGrafx CD, the Neo Geo CD, the Sega CD, the Sega Saturn, the original NES, the Sega Genesis, the Sega 32X, the Super Nintendo, and even the Nintendo 64. So basically, if you have a large physical game collection like I do, and you want to play, your original media on an emulation machine that's way easier to set up and configure than, say, a Windows computer, well, the PolyMega is a good solution for that. But that gets back to the original question. Why are they now releasing physical games, and, should we even care? Well, the idea here is that they want to do 2 things. They want to tap into that sort of physical game collector market, people like me and probably like you. Again, very similar to what Evercade does. But they also, through these releases, want a way to bring arcade games to their system. And so for the most part, these are arcade releases, although as we dive deeper into each one of these, you'll see that it gets more complicated than that, shall I say. With all that said, let's go ahead and jump into each one of these. Now, the first thing you're going to need to do if you have a PolyMega system is you're going to want to do a system update. Basically update the operating system so that it at least recognizes these disks, because first question I had was, well, can you just play these on, a Windows computer? And the answer is no, not easily. As a matter of fact, if you pop one of these into your computer, I popped it into my Mac here, and essentially it doesn't recognize the data partition at all. Instead, it basically just gives you these files, these PDF files that you can open up, but you can't play these on a computer by default. They're designed for the PolyMega itself, and you have to update the operating system so it at least recognizes them. Now, PolyMega did announce several years ago that they're working on an app you would run on your computer that would potentially run these discs, but I don't think it's out yet as of the making of this video. We're going to go ahead and start with the first one, which is the Asteroids Collection. There's a bunch of different games on here, and I'm going to go over that in a second, but we're going to open this up, and like I said, this is designed for the collector market, right? People who want physical media. So you open it up in here, and you have a stamped CD, which is good, so it's not a burn. You have a reversible cover, so each one of these you can choose how you want it to be displayed on your shelf, and you can choose the cover that you prefer. And then it's packed with extras here, including a Japanese style spine card that you can put on here if you prefer that sort of look. Each one of these has a specific manual covering the different controls for all the different games. There's a full color manual, and in that manual, they'll show the original arcade machine as well as some history and kind of backstory of the game, and maybe some trivia here and there. And then each one of these initial launches is going to come with a collector pin. Now, I don't know if they're going to do that forever, but they have stated on their website that these initial releases here will have this physical pin in there. And then once you pop the CD into the PolyMega, it reads it and gives you a couple options there. You can play it directly off the disc, or you can install it to your SSD, which is what I always choose to do. That way you don't have to put the disc in every time you want to play these, which is actually a really nice feature. And you get a lot of different games here. For instance, there's the arcade version of Asteroids, of course, but you also get Asteroids Deluxe. You get the Atari 7800 version, the 2600 version. There's also Gravatar for the arcade as well. as for the 2600. So you can see that they kind of go with themes here, at least for some of these. There's also Lunar Lander, the arcade version, which I have not played in decades, and it still holds up today. It's still fun and frustrating. You also have Super Asteroids for the Atari Lynx, as well as Space Duel Arcade and Orbit. And by the way, I read that a couple years ago, Atari actually became an investor in PolyMega, and so they got some cash to keep them going and also do some more of these releases. So I suspect in the future we will get a lot of Atari releases on the PolyMega. Next up is the Tiger Heli collection, and as you see here, again, it's a collector version of this. It comes with the CD. Then there's also the manual for the controls, as well as a full color manual for the games, and you get that collector pin. It's also here I want to mention that several of these arrived broken, essentially, or cracked, and you see it here where the CD part of it is separated because this little plastic hinge thing essentially broke off in shipping, which is kind of disappointing because, again, physical game collectors will want this to be, in great condition. Now, you're not spending a lot of money, but it is disappointing that several of these actually arrived either cracked or broken. So I'm not sure if that's just something that maybe mine got thrown around, but it was packed pretty well. And again, I just want to just kind of mention it because I know people will care. And as for the games that are included, well, you get Tiger Heli, which comes with the arcade version. And this is interesting here because you're going to see this with a lot of these, that you'll get the US release and the Japanese version of those arcade, games there. Now, as to which one you would play, I've read that sometimes the Japanese version is different in its difficulty, sometimes a bit easier, sometimes perhaps a bit harder. And so it's nice that with a lot of these, you will be getting both versions. And so in this collection, you get Tiger Heli, Twin Cobra, Sky Shark, Fire Shark, and Twin Hawk. So if you are a shoot 'em up fan, this is going to be the one that you're going to want to get. I was actually pretty excited to see this, so yeah. Now, built into the PolyMega is a bunch of different video options here. So you can go into the menu there and you can change, the video aspect ratios if you wish. It's very customizable, in my opinion. There's a lot of different options here. And then it's important to know that if you push up on the D-pad on that same screen, you can access virtual displays. And so you can really mix and match the look that you want here. So for instance, there's a bunch of different scanline options, both kind of weaker and stronger. There's also some really cool CRT displays where it starts curving the glass a little bit. And it also will apply a blur effect if you want. And then you can just kind of mix all those up and get the exact look that you're looking for. So I find that the options on the PolyMega actually are pretty nice that way. And then you see me playing Twin Cobra here with all of those options enabled. And while this might be a lot for some people, again, I'm just doing this for, just demonstration purposes, essentially. Next one we're checking out is Heavy Barrel. And for this one, like the others, you have the CD case there. And then you also have a printed CD, a reversible cover. You've got that Japanese strip there, as well as the manual for the controls and the main manual to talk about the games and give you, history and stuff like that. In this one, I was very curious to see how it was going to control. Now, the PolyMega comes with its own kind of, Xbox style controller, but I always just plug in an Xbox 360 controller to it. And essentially the way that this works with Heavy Barrel is that it plays fine because you just rotate your aim with the shoulder buttons. And so I was able to go into this just fine and play it and have a lot of fun. However, in Desert Assault, that's different the way it's set up because you shoot in whatever direction you happen to be running. Now, that may sound like it'd be good, but it's really not because essentially the way it plays is just really funky. I would much prefer there to be a strafe button, something that you could turn off or, on or off or something like that. It would make that game much less frustrating in my opinion. Next up, I'm going to check out Drift Out Collection. And then this is an interesting one here because I wasn't really familiar with it. Now, with this one, you get the US and Japanese versions of Drift Out, which is a top-down rally racing game. And then you also get Drift Out 94 as well as Neo Geo Drift Out. And then, check this out. They also include a soccer game called Goal, 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 as well as a bowling game, and then a boxing game on the Famicom. That's weird, right? I think what they're trying to do is kind of pad out the release of this, because I don't know how many people are actually that excited to play Drift Out, you know, by itself, in my opinion. I'm not really that big of a fan of the game, to be honest with you. I mean, it's fine, it plays fine, but I wouldn't by itself be, you know, motivated to pick this up. And so I do feel like with this one, they're trying to pad it out a little bit. Again, that's not a problem necessarily. It's just that it is a little odd. The next one we're going to check out is Breakers. And this is interesting because it comes with 2 CDs, but also notice that again, this one is broken from the factory. So these all came sealed, and I think it's just either maybe because the pin is in there as well. Maybe that's applying some pressure to it, or maybe just getting jostled around in shipping. I'm not entirely sure. When you pop the CD into the PolyMega, you'll notice that the first CD is full, and that's why they had to put this onto 2 of them. So this one is 770 megabytes. And in this one, you get Breakers as well as Breakers Revenge. These are some cool 2D fighting games, and then you also get Ganryu, I think is how you pronounce that, which is a game actually I recently picked up on Switch, so this has been re-released on other systems as well, and this is a side-scrolling hack-and-slash action game, which is set in feudal Japan, and it is a really fun game. And then you have Flip Shot and Bang Bead, which are kind of interesting takes on air hockey. They kind of mix in a little bit of Pong and maybe like a fighting game or something like that. So these are pretty fun and kind of unexpected in this collection. Then you have Bang Bang Busters. This is a single screen action puzzle game, which again, I was kind of surprised to see. And then to round it out, as if you didn't know what else to expect here. I know, it's so weird. You get Cowboy Kid on the NES and its Japanese version, which is called Western Kids. So again, kind of an odd choice to include all these in here. I'm not entirely sure if they're doing this just to pad them out or it's because they're from the same developer. Again, not complaining. It's obviously a good thing. You want more value for your money, but I thought that was kind of interesting. And then the second CD has the Neo Geo CD version of Karnov's Revenge, or it's called Fighter's History Dynamite in Japan, if that's your thing. So again, they're kind of including every version that they possibly can here. And I think this is probably my favorite collection so far, just because each of these games is actually really good and you're not burned out on them, right? So it's really fun to jump in there. I just like the variety, and you know, they're actually games that you're probably going to want to play. Next up is Karate Champ, and this is a 2 CD set. This is an interesting one for me because Karate Champ, also known as Way of the Karate in Japan, is one of the earliest kind of one-on-one fighting games that I remember back in the 80s when I would go to the arcade. This game was a big deal at the time, and I remember it fondly. I wasn't really that good at it, but I do remember it being a really big deal. There was a lot of excitement about this. And so with this, you get the arcade versions as well as the NES and Famicom Disk System versions. So again, they're adding not only the arcade versions, but you know, some of the home console versions as well. There's also Fighter's History Dynamite, which that's what it was called in Japan. Over here, it was called Karnov's Revenge in the US. Another 2D fighting game. And then that second CD that's included here is the Neo Geo CD version. So again, if that's a version of it that you remember growing up on, well, it's included here. This is one I had not heard of before. I was very curious about it. It's called the Captain Tamade Collection. Now, if you look at that photo, if you look at the cover right there, you would think this is some sort of cutesy little, you know, Japanese-inspired platformer, right? Nope. It's a vertical shooter. It's a cute 'em up. And it's a pretty good one. Again, I was not familiar with this at all, and so it was really fun to play something brand new. And so that's what this entire collection is. It's actually a bunch of shooters. So yeah, you've got a bunch of them here. Some of them are vertical and some of them are horizontal. And so there's actually, you know, a good mix of them here. Although they do throw in a random puzzle game called Blockin' for some reason. Again, it's probably just cheap to license it, so they figured they'd throw it in here. But for the most part, this collection is all about shooters. I will say probably my favorite one on this collection is a game called Stormblade. This is a vertical shooter right here, you see it. And what's cool about it is that it has pre-rendered visuals. So it looks absolutely gorgeous. It's probably the most current of all of these that was released, but also it's just the most fun. It's the most least frustrating, I think. I was able to get pretty far in this game, which, by the way, reminds me, this is important to know because, you know, a lot of these older arcade games, you were expected to just sit there with your finger and hammer the fire button, which can give you carpal tunnel, right? So a nice thing about the PolyMega is that you can go into it on any game that you want and map turbo to that fire button. So basically you just go into the menu system and you can turn on, you know, auto fire turbo for the fire button, and then all you have to do is hold it down. So that's a really nice feature of the PolyMega, and in these shooters it's very, very welcome. And then we have the Bad Dudes Collection, and this is another one that showed up broken. So I don't know what's going on here. I don't know if they're just packing too much stuff into that case, or it's the metal pin that's maybe moving around and knocking stuff around, or maybe the plastic is too brittle. But it's definitely disappointing. And again, I know these aren't expensive, and so, you know, set your expectations accordingly, but that is something that they should probably try to fix because, you know, physical game collectors like me care. That's why we're buying these. But anyway, so let's get into the games itself. So this contains the arcade version of Bad Dudes, which is also called Dragon Ninja, and you get the Japanese version of that as well. I thought this next one was kind of interesting. So it's called Too Crude, or Crude Buster, or Two Crude Dudes, depending on the region of the game, I guess. I know, I always thought that name was kind of interesting, but what's cool here is that you get the NES version, the Famicom version, you also get the Sega Genesis version and the Mega Drive version of those games as well, which I think this is the only collection that they do that. And so, yeah, if you're nostalgic for a particular version of this game, or you just want to play the others and kind of see what's different, well, you can do that here. And so all told, with 8 of these collections, you get 93 different versions of these games, which is a lot. But that's also a little misleading, right? So you're not really getting 93 specifically different games, but you're just getting all these different versions of it, which I guess is kind of cool because it's sort of archiving every version of these classic games, right? I will say, though, that, you know, some of these collections are kind of cool and some of them are not that great, or at least of not that much interest to me. You know, for instance, Asteroids. Like, you can get Asteroids on a bunch of different systems, it seems like, and it's not really that special. You know, Heavy Barrel, it's okay. The Drift Out one, not really a fan. The Breakers one, I think, is pretty cool. The Captain Tomade, I think, is actually really cool. Do we need another collection of Bad Dudes? Probably not. And so it's going to be interesting to see what they release going forward. I do feel like that they need to kind of tap into some collections that maybe other people haven't done already. You know, one of them that always comes to mind is a Cave shooter collection, right? Cave made some of the best shooters of all time, and there's not that many collections out there. I think there is one on the Switch, but there's not one on the Evercade. I do feel like that would be a good fit for here. I'd also like to see them push more into the 90s and maybe do some of the mid to late 90s, you know, racing games, stuff like that. So I don't know, lots of potential here. As you can see, I like some aspects of it, and other parts, you know, could probably use some help. Definitely they need to figure out what's going on with the shipping and the breaking cases. That is definitely annoying. But overall, these are pretty cool collections and they don't cost that much. But I would love to know what you guys think. Do you have a PolyMega and are you interested in the specific collections that they are releasing? Let me know down in the comments below. And as always, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing and take care.